really, whether or not they've applied to engineering or the College of Letters and Science or whatever it may be, we have enough information through the UC application without a specific question about the field of study to know whether or not they will be successful if we admit them to that field of study. There are a few exceptions to that. At UCLA and some of the other UCs, if you apply into a performing arts-based major, if you apply into the School of Nursing, if you apply into some of the other options like the arts, there may be a supplemental form that includes an interview, an audition, or answering additional questions. And that could be the opportunity, for example, in nursing, to talk about why do you want to be a nurse? And the faculty in that school at UCLA or even another UC will definitely take that into account. But for most places in the College of Letters and Science and the School of Engineering, there isn't that opportunity, and that's not something we're looking for in the answers to the personal insight questions.
Right, and that's the beauty about the UC system, because you recognize these are teenagers. There is going to be some kids like, I'm not sure if I want to do engineering. What is really engineering? How many kids have not looked at the course requirements? You'd be surprised.
It's so true.
It's so true.
Yes.
Right, and they're so young, right? They're sometimes even 16, 17. So, but if a campus has a program that has specific questions, when they go in their application August 1st, they will be prompted to know that there'll be supplementals like the nursing, different film programs, if they have those type of different things right on there. And then they're not obligated, but if they have a great talent in robotics, they could talk about it, and it's okay if they're engineer, undecided, or even an art major.
Yes, because if it's part of who you are, what kind of defines that student, no matter what they apply into, they should talk about that in the personal insight question answers. Because even if you're undecided and we read one of the PIQ answers that talks about a robotics team or leading a robotics effort or really being engaged in that, that doesn't mean they have to be an engineer. That's not going to set them at a disadvantage, but it's part of who they are, and we want to know that.
Yeah, just because I go to art museums all the time and do tortoise me, I'm going to be an art major.
Exactly.
Nobody will want me as an art major, trust me. So in PIQs, I love when you say that, which is personal insight questions.
Yes.
Yeah, I love it, like PIQs.
The UC acronyms.
Yeah, very savvy. So I've heard stories that sometimes a student would write, this is why I will be perfect at UCLA, and then at another campus may read that, right? How would the other UC readers take that into account? Because a lot of time, college counselors will say, don't do it. It's like, no, I must show my demonstrated interest. Like, no, they don't use that. No, I must. So, response?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is we absolutely do not use demonstrated interest at the University of California. So none of the campuses are tracking your interest in the campus, emails, phone calls, visits. We don't care about that. By simply raising your hand and applying, that's your interest demonstrated. That's all we need to see. Now, that will vary from other private universities and other options, so it's always worth exploring. But for the UC, we don't require that. And the UC application is specifically structured where there's no question that is specific why this campus or why UC. The UC application is all about the student. It's all about you, and honestly looking at you up to this point. It's not a future-focused application. The content you're sharing is about what have you done, what have you taken advantage of, what issues have you dealt with over the past X number of years. And so to put a question on there that would say, or for you to give an answer to say, this is what I'm looking at in the future, actually doesn't align with the application. We're looking at your past to then consider what we can do to ensure you are successful in the future. And so if you share too much about the future, that doesn't really align with the structure of the application. So students sometimes want to do that. I would advise not doing that. Whenever we see something like that, because every year students do that, where you'll see another campus name in one of the answers, it's not something that puts them at a complete disadvantage, but it makes us wonder about their maturity, their ability to follow direction, their ability to actually answer the questions posed to them. And if we have thousands of students who have answered the questions and have not done that, it's going to be hard to admit someone who isn't doing that.
No, and I think that just gives advice to all us parents and guardians out there, mentors, like stop asking what you're going to do when you grow up. What are you doing now?
Yes.
Right? Because I have had a lot of students like, oh, one day when I'm like, well, what about today or yesterday, right? From the kid who lives like in Yucca Valley, who has to walk a mile to the library, or if you're a kid where the library is a block from you, what are you doing for that community? Mm-hmm. What are you doing if you have so many resources? Like, we're very blessed in the Bay Area. It's like, you have a lot of resources. Not everyone does. How are you really pushing that limit? But at the same time, you don't want anything too far away.
No.
Because I know some kids were like, like even for my kids, and my kids were divorced. Like, yeah, but you were 2. I mean, unless we're in court all the time, thank God we're not. Then that's a long time ago. But unless it's something that's constantly happening, right? We've had some students who've been homeless, or some people, right, where there's health issues, where they're taking care of their grandparents. Then that's something where you could kind of reflect on, but again, more in recent years in their high school.
The focus absolutely should be on what has impacted or influenced you in the past, say, 2 to 3 years, or if there was something, within the past 5 years that is continually influencing you, absolutely. If you're going back to elementary school or something that happened in your family at that time in your life, odds are that's probably a little bit further back. And so that's something that I absolutely would agree. The focus should be on more recent either activities, involvement, things that define you. Any challenges or hurdles that you've dealt with should be in the last few years.
Okay, that's good. So that's a lot of storytelling, but you guys only allow 350 words for each insight question, and there's 4 of them. So explain to our listeners, why is it so short, and what are some tips on how to start and execute it?
Yeah, so in terms of the length, we really feel that you can convey what you need to answer those questions in 350 words. So back to what I said earlier, the questions are intentional.
Yes.
They are worded in a way that you should read the entire question and only answer what we're asking for.
Yes.
Too often students don't always read the whole question, so they might even only answer half of it, or they'll scan it and just start answering without truly giving some thought to what we're asking about. Yeah. So if you actually read the question, 350 words is very doable. We did not structure these questions to make it feel like you're at a disadvantage with the word count.
Yes.
So it is possible. It just will involve a lot of editing, a lot of thinking about what truly needs to be in here. And that's a really good exercise for students, because that's ultimately what you're going to have to do in college. Faculty and professors, they're going to have different expectations, and being a little more concise, being direct, is a great exercise in terms of college preparation. So first of all, we know that there's always some stress around the 350 words, but it's doable, and the students just need to really think about what truly needs to be in here, and then all the fluff or the extra stuff can float away, and it's perfectly fine. So absolutely, the word count we think works well. We're not looking for an essay. This is an answer to a question, and brevity is appreciated in an answer to a question, but it's not an essay, and we can't stress that enough. And your second part of the question was...
So how would they start that, and then how would they end it?
So in terms of starting, first, the other thing too is, since it's not an essay, this isn't an English class exercise. This isn't an English essay.
That's right.
The best way to think about this is kind of how I'm answering your questions. I'm not starting my answers with a quote. I'm not talking about it being a dark and stormy day. I'm not going into that unnecessary kind of additional insight. You want to just answer the question, go right into the answer. You can transition quickly to other answers within the question. Okay. You don't have to worry about transitions like you would in the sense of an essay. And then you don't also have to worry about wrapping it up. You can just stop. And we're looking for content and information. We're not looking at your writing ability. We're not looking at grammar, in the sense of, as long as everything looks like you have made an effort, content is what matters. We'll judge your English classes and other things where we'll get some insight into your ability to write.
Yeah. I see many seniors who wait till the last minute. Those procrastinators, you gotta love them. I'm one of them. True confession time. So what are your recommendations on the timeline for students to work on it, since the deadline is a hard set deadline for November 30th every year for seniors?
Yeah, I think one of the best things you can do is just review the questions and start to make kind of a list of which ones you want to answer. Hopefully that gets you to 4. If it's 5 or 6, then you can start to narrow that list down. And what I would say is, depending on each person has a different process that they go through.
Right.
So own your process, go with what works best for you. How a lot of students tend to have some success is just thinking from either one standpoint or the other. Either what is it about you that you want to get across? Make a list of those topics, skills, experiences, and then start to connect them to PIQs. Mm-hmm. So you could start with your experience and see how those different things connect with the PIQs. Other students will look at the PIQ answers and start to actually outline or chart out what could they say about them. And that will help students in some ways start to think about, well, do I have a lot to say about this? I thought I did, maybe I don't. Right. And before you've actually written something, you have some idea of what you may or may not say, or areas that are more important to get across, and a few others that may drift away as you then sit down to actually write them. But the stress should be taken out because you're not writing an English essay. And so it's content, it's answering a question like you would an interview kind of setting. And I think that for a lot of students, then you just start to put the words down, and as long as you get what you want across, you're already pretty close to being done.
Mike, can you share with us like one of your most memorable personal insights and maybe not so memorable one?
Yeah, this is one of those things where the personal insight questions are not meant to be unique in the sense of you shouldn't be striving to write something that no one's ever written about.
That's right.
Thousands of students are going to answer the same question as you. That's perfectly fine.
Right, because you have 100,000 applications.
Exactly, it's
right?
just going to happen. The goal, though, is for it to be your voice, your experience, your story. And with that in mind, one of the personal insight questions that has always stood out to me is one where a student wrote about her morning routine with her father. She talked about how her dad worked long hours. In the morning, it was the only time they really had together. Both of them woke up. They had breakfast together. And one thing that she talked about is being senior year, that as she left the house, she always said goodbye to her dad, and they headed in their separate directions. And she realized that time was coming to an end. That when she went off to college, she wouldn't even have that time with her dad, and that she really valued it. So she walked us through her morning routine, what they talked about, what they did, and then the value that had on her kind of her experience as a student and as a daughter. That was personal. It
Right.
gave insight. I learned something about her that I couldn't have learned from other parts of the application that isn't as a parent.
That's right.
And a little bit of a demonstration of maturity that she realized this was changing and she was taking full advantage of the time she had. So as you can tell, this wasn't groundbreaking.
No.
This wasn't an essay on Mozart or someone who had been leading so many activities. They had drastically changed the environment they were in. But in some cases, it is just that personal story, that anecdote, that experience that really sticks with you.
Yeah. Well, that shares wisdom.
Yes.
Yeah.
And comfort with saying, this is a bit about me that really defines who I am, and I feel very comfortable being able to share this. And it fit the prompt. She answered the question. That was what we wanted to hear. Too often, the personal insight question answers that stand out are the ones that don't do any of what we just said.
Yes.
Where they're the most generic. You could almost if you drop 10 of them on the floor and pick them all up, you almost couldn't put them back with an application because they all are so general that you don't even know where they go. And so I think that's the biggest challenge is students sometimes play it way too safe. They write the answer in a way that it's so generic that it sounds like any high school student in the United States could write it.
It's like a resume, but not an interview.
Exactly. If students steer clear of that, the personal insight questions will work to their advantage. So they want to be like that student who gave that personal story, that insight into a part of her day and her relationship with her father. That allows us to have a better visual of someone and envision them in our campus community.
Yeah. And that's what the beauty of like journal writing, even if you're just writing bullet points, right? Whoever you are, right? So you could always kind of dictate that because that kind of helps you just for personal growth. That's why I love that it's not a personal statement, it's a personal insight because you want that reflection, right? Not just like that speech that's out there.
Yes. No, right. I think journaling could be a great way to kind of reflect on for the past X number of months what has kind of been prevalent on my mind, or what am I tending to do with my time? What do I value in my time? And then when you actually sit down to chart that out, it's less having to recall all of that, but you have some of that written down.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times what makes it so hard for kids is a lot of times they're being told what to think or to memorize this and that, not versus what makes you great or what's important for you. And their voices are really important, whether they're